I want to say a few words about our speaker, Steve McCane, before he comes up and gives the presentation. And it's a little bit of his background, and he's kind of modest. I think there's more to his background than what's in this bio, but that's all right. I'll let him tell you more about himself. But although he's not from here, he knows the area. He's a religion major from Washington and Lee University just a few years ago, as I recall. And while he was at Washington and Lee, he was selected for a very honorable role as an exchange student to Chung Chi College at the Chinese University of Hong Kong in should I say the years?
Sure.
1975-76, when Mao Zedong was still living. So, different era in China. He also attended Kansai Gadai International University in Osaka, Japan, and Normal University Mandarin Language Center in Taipei, Taiwan. Sometime after that, he returned to Taiwan for a full year of Chinese Mandarin language study in the early 80s. He went to the University of Hawaii to get his MBA with a concentration in Asian business dynamics. And while he was in Hawaii, he attended the Asian Pacific Management Institute, which was part of the East-West Center on Oahu. After that, he started an entrepreneurial career. He started a business with two other individuals while in Florida. He raised $5 million at that time in venture capital, which back in that era, some 30 years ago, was an awful lot of money. The company at the time, Environmental Solvents Corporation, with that company, he traveled extensively to China on a variety of projects regarding sourcing and logistics. He later formed his own corporation, the Blue Frog Corporation, selling a variety of organic chemistries to major national, international companies in North America and traveling to China. He also took another company, T2 Laboratories, from 0 sales to 12 million sales in just about 2 years, selling products in the Chinese market. So he's always had this interest and affinity for the Asian mindset in the marketplace. And through his entrepreneurial experiences and his years of study, he's gotten very interested in harmonic business relationships. And so tonight, I don't think he's going to tell us about how to be an entrepreneur and raise capital. He's going to think about and tell us about, give us some things to walk away from here on the ideas of that title and how his long journey in the last several decades has brought him to this point in his understanding of Chinese and American relations. So, Steve?
Well, let's get started. You know, it's really strange because I had no intent to do anything with this East Asia or China until 2 weeks before I was to attend WNL. In fact, I didn't know why I was going to attend WNL. I didn't know what to major in and what have you. And then saying goodbye to various friends. I was in a truck with a friend from Swarthmore High School in Philadelphia, and his name's George Schmidheiser, and we're driving in a truck, and it's like, it was a critical question. It just changed my life. He says, what about Buddha? Because we were talking about some Christian thoughts and what have you. And I said, gee, what about Buddha? And so 2 weeks later, I have to determine what I'm going to take at WNL. And my mom's a teacher. She was a teacher for 40 years. And I gave her a call, and I said, Mom, what am I supposed to major in? You know, I don't know why I'm going to college. You kind of pushed me into it and said I got to do it in 4 years and do it fast. And she said, as a teacher, she said, well, study whatever interests you. And I said, well, I'm interested in East Asian religions. I'd like to know more about that. And so I did. I started right off very quickly with Dr. Minor Rogers and Dr. Harrison Pemberton, and I started to study that. And then I did that for a year and a half, and a friend of mine, Bruce Raven, came into my Five-side house over there on Washington Street, and he said, "Steve, did you know there's a exchange program at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the dean's son just came back. He went there 5 days. He said it was so weird. He got on a plane and came back. So they're going to take two students this year. Would you like to join me?" And there were like 15 applying for it. And lo and behold, because I'd studied the matter and I was really interested in it, and Harrison Pepperton, Dr. Pepperton, gave me a book, and it was just full. It was a color book about Hong Kong, and I was just amazed about it, and I was enthralled by the culture and whatever, and I'd been studying it, but I really didn't understand it because I hadn't been there. So I went over there, and I spent 18 months over there, and the biggest surprise for me wasn't going over there, it was coming back. You know, the culture shock coming back after you're exposed to a different culture for 18 months, it's just amazing. It kind of silenced me. So I spent my senior year at W&L studying Chinese and Chinese history and what have you. And after several years, I returned to Taiwan because I hadn't taken my Chinese to the level I'd like. And after that, I went to the only school that was teaching Asian business in the country in the mid-'80s. And you could get an MBA from. That was the University of Hawaii. I know University of Hawaii is something that it sounds like I should major in windsurfing or something like that. But it actually was a very good school, and it had the East-West Center there, where I also took extra courses during the summer. So then after that, I got out and became an entrepreneur, and I kept on doing things in the American world, the North American world, and I kept on being brought in because I had Chinese language skills. And over time, you know, I started to see some patterns. The very first time I went to Taiwan and Hong Kong and Japan, it was more experiential. And so I really didn't see patterns. But when you go to the places again and again and again, you start to see patterns of people. And I started to, it wasn't so much an experiment, it was a seeking of harmony in all the relationships I had encountered. And one thing that I learned at W&L from Dr. Harrison was his class on existentialism. And it was like an epiphany that happened this one day when he got into existentialism and started talking about it. And it's, you know, it's a very simple concept, is that we influence the people around us. Just like in quantum physics, we start to look at electrons or what have you. You know, we influence where the electrons are going just by looking at it. So people react to the way we act. It's not so much it's their fault they did this or that. It's that we're both together, moving together. And so this concept kept on coming to me. And also that all the things that we do are organic. It's not, you know, like Zig Ziglar, a very famous guy who's got a lot of tapes on how to sell. He says you got to do the pitch the same time every time. I'm just the total opposite. It's my feeling that every time you sit down with a new person or you sit down with an old friend, you know, it's a new organic experience. So the way you react is the way they're going to act. So it came to me that after a while, the way I was working in China is that, you know, I could pull out of them a particular nature by the way I was reacting to them. And so, you know, in simple terms, you either are pulling the art of war. Now, what I'm doing is simplifying it. There's quite a few different Chinese philosophies, but I'm bringing out two major philosophies. The art of war, which is the art of strategy and overcoming and deception. You know, in simple terms, you're either pulling the Sun Tzu art of war out of your Chinese counterpart by being too tactical or deceptive, or you're pulling the honorable aspect of your Chinese counterpart by being honorable and gentle, or being more Confucian. So up here, you know, this is what Dr. Pepperton said. I had thought before that the you there was outside the circle. Well, what I really realized that I was always inside the circle, influencing the way. He wrote The Art of War. He was a particular person whose grandfather was a general, his father was a general, and so in Chinese it's Shun Zi Bing Fa or Bing Fa, is the art of war. It's really the method of war, just a literal translation. And the whole aspect of this is that it's during the Zhou dynasty. This is about 500 BC, where there's limited resources, and they're trying to figure out how to overcome different states. The states are all pretty much broken up, and it's still a united country, but they're struggling with each other. And so he developed a philosophy of overcoming the enemy. And he was a very much employed individual. And in his philosophy, you know, he wanted to minimize the use of force. If he could overcome the enemy without expending any resources, he basically won. And that's the essence of Shunzi. And it's used in Chinese business, and you see it in the archetype of personalities. So, you know, he wants to unnerve the opponent, mislead the opponent, demoralize the opponent, outmaneuver and threaten the opponent. These are all aspects of Shunzi, or Shunzi Bingfa, the art of war. And there's actually 6 different classics. And they just found in the 1970s a 7th classic, all by different authors, all during a similar period of time, all about warring, which is all during the Zhou dynasty. So, you know, you need to seek to spread chaos and disorder in the enemy, and it's infecting our forces now, this type of thinking. And actually, the very first time Shunzi was translated in French, Napoleon used it. And it was used against us in Vietnam, one of the reasons why we struggled so much in it. But also, there isn't a reciprocal interaction is absent from Sun Tzu. So just because they attack you doesn't mean you attack them back. So, you know, that is not the way to produce harmonic relations, is to bring the Shunzi out of a Chinese individual. And before I go to Confucius, you know, we've got to look at what was Confucius looking at. Did Confucius, or Kongzi in Chinese, did Kongzi have origination of all his thought? No. He actually was looking back 1,500 years, 1,600 years to the beginning of the Shah dynasty. And during that time, I just want to start from our present moment and walk back with different concepts. We have this term called the mandate of heaven. And the mandate of heaven is a real interesting term because it was used very much in 1976. 3 top leaders of China that ruled China, actually from 1949, October 1st, 1949 onwards. But even before that, in different areas of China, through the Long March, etc. Since the 20s, these people had led the Communist Party. Zhou Enlai died, Zhu De died, Mao Zedong died. It was really interesting because I was an exchange student at the Chinese University of Hong Kong when Zhou Enlai died on January 8th, 1976. And all of a sudden, everybody's crying. And they put these posters up, and there were flowers all over the hostel that I was living in. And I realized that this was very similar to John Fitzgerald